Oh, man. There you guys go. Oh, hey. Some of you guys are here. So good to see you guys. If you were here last week and you go, why is Pastor Zeke not sitting there and he's sitting over there? And I had a few people, it's like, why are... It's like, 'cause I wasn't teaching last week. Me and my wife were gone for most of the week. And if I cannot prepare to be able to come and give you, study enough, is like I have other people. And if you missed last week's study, go back to it. Kevin Overdoon, I've known this kid since he was like 3 years old. And when I stepped back from being the youth pastor, he's the one that took over for me. And I just love his style, just the way he teaches. He's just amazing. And so if you missed it, you can go online and listen to it and watch it. When I'm not teaching on Thursday nights, the guys, whoever I ask to teach, are going through the book of James right now. And so I'm just excited to have people around me to be able to step in when I can't or when I won't. Because I was here. I could have maybe, possibly. But we were starting a new book, and I didn't want to just kind of try to wing it because I just can't. But anyways, as we continue in our Old Testament studies in the minor prophets, turn, if you will, to the book of Habakkuk. I know some people call it Habakkuk. I call it Habakkuk. So it just depends where you put the emphasis. I'm going to call it Habakkuk. And again, if you're one of those people, it's like, it's Habakkuk. Every time I say Habakkuk, you're going to go, So be patient with me, okay? But it's another short 3-chapter book. And so I intend to at least do 1 chapter a night, and then we'll continue from there. Now, again, the length of these books, when we're studying the minor prophets, it's the length. That's why they're known as the minor prophets. And the only difference between the major prophets and the minor prophets, it's the length of it, not the content of that. It's not like Habakkuk was any less than Jeremiah or that Joel was any less than Isaiah or Ezekiel. They just had longer books. And so that's why they call them the minor prophets and the major prophets and things like that. But as far as importance, man, they are all important. And so as often as I do, as we often do, let's read the first verse to get our introduction into the book of Habakkuk and get as much detail as we can of who, what, and why. And so Habakkuk chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, the burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. And that's the verse. And we're going to stay there for a little bit. What we notice right off the get-go here is that the book of Habakkuk doesn't start like some of the other minor prophets do by saying, and the word of the Lord came to so-and-so, because some of the other minor prophets that we have gone through, that's the way it starts off in similar fashion to saying, no, the word of the Lord came to this guy here, and now he's going to share the word of the Lord with you. It starts off with the burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. And it is basically the same way as the book of Nahum started, that we went through not a few weeks ago. And it's not to say that the word of the Lord didn't come to these guys, because the word of the Lord did come to them, but they started off a little different. And here he just says the burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. But the word of the Lord did somehow speak to them because they write something for us. They do have something to share with us. As I shared with you when we did do Nahum in the beginning, the word burden is also translated oracle. And so in one instance, if you're looking at the word burden, it speaks of something that is heavy. But when you're speaking about oracle, it's something that is spoken. In other words, it's something that is spoken and there's some weight or some heaviness behind it. And that weight and that heaviness, oftentimes of what's going to come out, can produce sorrow or grief because of what is being said. But in this instance, it's not so much what the prophet says, but in what the prophet sees. He's saying, here's the burden that I saw, that the Lord showed me. He sees something. I'm sure he heard it, but he sees something that he can't get away from. Again, he's put himself in a place where he knows the Lord. We will get to the fact that he's called a prophet, so he's in that realm, but he was in a place where he's able to see something from the Lord. He was able to receive it, and not only receive it, but to be able to convey it. And I think it's kind of fascinating as we move on into this introduction that we have this, because he could have said, man, that was crazy, and not wrote anything down. And maybe spoke to some people about it, but we wouldn't have had it here in the Word of God. But somehow he wrote it down. Now, again, what we see in this verse is that the prophet saw something. And so more than likely, it is a vision that the Lord has allowed him to see, that he has revealed to him. Now, many believe that Habakkuk ministered sometime during the reign of King Jehoiakim, towards the end of the southern kingdom, one of the last kings. At this time, perhaps the year is somewhere about 607 BC, because that is around the time frame that Jehoiakim was king. He reigned from 608 to 597, but what happens after a certain period, things begin to happen that we're going to see a little later, but they're thinking that maybe around 607 is when he's kind of sharing this. And what is interesting about that time frame is that the prophet is writing this, is that he's already beginning to see things physically. He's already perceiving that the southern kingdom, the kingdom of Judah, because the northern kingdom has already been gone for over 100 years. But the southern kingdom, he's seeing that things are spiraling out of control, and they're beginning to, or they have been deteriorating. You see, ever since the death of King Josiah in 609 BC, King Josiah was the one that had this revival, because his dad was evil. His son after him would be evil, but he had this revival, and there was stuff that was going on. And so quite possibly Habakkuk was part of that, or part of being in that revival. And then things started changing when that king died, and his son Jehoiakim became his successor. And it almost seems like they had forgotten all the good things that King Josiah had done. Now, it's hard to forget certain things, right? And I could imagine that they really didn't forget. They just ignored what God had been doing. And I've shared this with you guys often, because oftentimes we talk of people that's like, oh man, they're just so far away from the Lord. They don't even know the Lord. They know the Lord. People cannot forget what they know. Some people, no, I totally forgot. It's like, no, you just don't want to remember. Because oftentimes, especially when you had this encounter with God and it's changed your life, and then pretty soon you're not walking with Him. And I was just thinking of someone in my life that was here a while back, and I know that their life has spiraled basically out of control and doing stuff that I thought he would never have done again. I never would have imagined it. But I thought, but he hasn't forgotten who God is. He's just ignoring who who God is, and he's missing out on the blessings that he had once received from the Lord. Oh, I'm sure he's making life work. And so what happens here is when people, again, they've had this revival, and all of a sudden this evil king comes in, and he just puts that away, and they want to do what's right in their own mind, in their own eyes. And what the prophet sees as he's seeing the country deteriorate, that's a long word, deteriorate. He's seeing that they're getting closer and closer to disaster. It's pending. It's imminent. So what the prophet Habakkuk saw he saw what was already has been happening, but it seems like he saw also what would be coming. And that was weighing heavy on him. That's part of the burden that he's talking about here. Because you see, if he is somewhere about 607 BC, in a couple of years from that time, in 605 BC, there would be an invading army coming and beginning to destroy Israel or Judah, what's left of it. That would be the beginning of this army, the Babylonian army that is now ruling supreme. And we kind of saw that in Nahum, how they were coming into power. And it would be years afterwards, some 40, 50 years, that now they're coming after the southern kingdom, after they've already taken care of the Assyrians. And so it's only in the horizon right here that he could see that, man, we're already rolling out of control. Now, the theme of the book of Habakkuk, according to my Bible, because I have little things up on top up here at the beginning, the theme is from doubt to faith. And what makes this book of Habakkuk kind of unique, as you're reading it, as you're going through it, is that it's not so much about the message that is proclaimed. It's about a private conversation that the prophet Habakkuk is having with the Lord. That's what the whole book is all about. He's not on the street corners preaching. He's not going to certain places and preaching. This message that is weighing heavy on him is a private conversation that he's having because of what he saw. And it's weighing heavy on him. Habakkuk is the writer of this book. But not much is known about him, because he doesn't give us a location of where he comes from, where he was born, maybe his hometown. He doesn't tell us that. But we know that the northern kingdom's already gone, so he's part of the southern kingdom. He doesn't give us a lineage of telling us who his dad was, who his ancestors were. It doesn't tell us what was his upbringing, but it does say that he is called a prophet here in our text. So quite possibly, he comes from a lineage of maybe priests or people in the religious system, or perhaps God just called him out of wherever he was going. Again, I think we saw in Amos, he was a sheep herder. And God called him. Just a regular old guy. But this one here, he's called the prophet. And what is interesting about Habakkuk is in the way he writes this book as well. Again, it's a personal conversation, basically, that between him and the Lord, but he writes it in a psalm form, if you will. And it's interesting because at the end of the book, in the very last verse, he mentions the fact, as he's closing up, he says, to the chief musician. And that phrase, the chief musician, it's a musical notation for the choir master of the temple liturgy or rite or rituals that they do. He also says at the end, he says, with my stringed instruments. So he was a musician. And so some speculate because he was that kind of musician that like the psalmists that are songs, they wrote in a poetic kind of way, but they had these passionate kind of things that they share, very personal. And so he kind of gets a little emotional, a little passionate. You know, musicians, they kind of get a little emotional there. The name Habakkuk, it's interesting because his name means embrace or to embrace. But it can also mean wrestle, to wrestle. And both can be true at the same time, which kind of goes with the theme of the book, because we will see him wrestle with doubt, but he will also embrace faith. And so in verse 2 to verse 4, he says, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and you will not hear? Even cry out to you violence, and you will not save. Why do you show me iniquity and cause me to see trouble? For plundering and violence are before me. There is strife and contention arises. Therefore, the law is powerless, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous. Therefore, perverse judgment proceeds. Oh Lord, how long? I don't know if you've ever been in that place in your life before. Where you may end up thinking but never saying or uttering, because God forbid that you would be honest with the Lord. But you use the phrase, oh Lord, how long? Because that's not very Christian, right? We shouldn't be in that place, should we? But have you ever been in that place? Be honest with yourself. And I'm sure most of you are going, yeah, that was just on my way over here. Some of you guys are like, Lord, how long will that guy stand up there? No. But we find ourselves in places like that, right? And this is where we find the prophet here, that again, he's not saying that to the masses. He's not going to preach this message and yelling out, Lord, how long? He is in this relationship and this intimacy with the Lord, just like we are at times when we're crying like that. Lord, how long? And most of the time, it is when we feel that the Lord somehow is not acting fast enough on our behalf. When we're saying that, when we're doing that, we're kind of desperate because something is going on in our lives, whatever it is, and you feel that the Lord should have acted already, and He hasn't. And because He hasn't, because He's lingering in acting on your behalf, we end up saying those kinds of things. Lord, how long? How long, O Lord? Again, without saying it, I know that we think it. Or maybe we do say it, but we find ourselves thinking that God just seems to be so indifferent to your plight. That He's so insensitive because, again, you don't care what's going on in my life, do you, Lord? And it's almost like that's where we find this guy as he starts off his book. And again, I'm sharing with you, this is an intimate book. Maybe perhaps it may have never made it out somewhere, but it did, and we get to read about it. But I love the fact that this prophet, who is called the prophet, is in a place of almost agony. He has this thing that's going on. And he's being honest with the Lord. And I think oftentimes when we are in that place of, Lord, how long? It's almost because we feel that He really doesn't care. He really doesn't care, because if He really did care, it wouldn't have gotten to this point of me saying or thinking, why don't you hear me? Why doesn't God help me? We seem to want God to be patient and long-suffering when we are the ones that are kind of messing up in life, when we've done something stupid. And we're going like, oh, please, Lord, just be patient with me. Help me. Lord, please don't let the hammer fall right now. And we want Him to be patient with us and long-suffering when we're in sin, oftentimes. And we know it. And we think we're getting away with it because we do know that He's long-suffering. And we kind of like that. But when it comes to me being the one that's hurting, that's suffering, that man, oh man, Lord, I can't believe this has happened to me. I want God to be Johnny on the spot. I want Him to, like, right now, here you go, Zeke. Come on, mijo. Let's take care of this right now. Oh, I'm so sorry that you felt that I didn't care. I truly do care. We want God to dote all over us. Habakkuk's words of, oh Lord, how long? Again, show us that he's in a bad place, it seems like, because he saw something. He saw what was going on. Again, he had already seen it happening, but now he sees that it's just snowballing out of control. And you can almost sense the agony that he seems to be going, Lord, why are you delaying so long in responding to my concerns? Because you knew, Lord, before I ever said, oh Lord, how long? You already know that I felt that. But you see, Habakkuk wasn't the only one that we read in Scripture about that has this kind of plight of saying, Lord, how long? There's many examples, but I chose two that as I'm looking up how long, Psalm 13, 1 through 4, David is writing, says, how long, O Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Verse 4, lest my enemies say, I have prevailed against him. Lest those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. Man, David. How many times has God let you down, David? How many times has He seen you through all these things? But at that particular moment, and he was being honest, and I love that he writes, Lord, how long? Are you going to forget me forever, Lord? I thought it was one of your favorites, but it seems like you've turned your back on me. In Psalm 74, verses 10 and 11, I think it's Asaph who is writing this one. He says, Oh Lord, how long will the adversaries reproach? Will the enemies blaspheme your name forever? Why do you withdraw your hand, even your right hand? Take it out of your bosom and destroy them. In other words, do something. Do something, Lord. You're not doing anything. And it's almost like interesting because he's saying, how long will they blaspheme your name? It's not about me, Lord. It's about you. You know? They're saying stuff about you, God, and you're almost like, Lord, do something to them. Come on. It's almost like the little brother going to the big brother. No, tell him something, big brother. He's going, calm down, Brostein. I think Habakkuk, as he's complaining here about his troubles and the troubles of his people, what he's describing is the injustice that is so rampant that is going on around him right now with his own people. And he asks, how long? And why? Why are you showing me this, Lord? In verse 2, we have the word cry in two different sentences here. And the first cry can translate simply to cry, to call for help. But the second cry, when he says, even cry out to you violence, that word cry is a different Hebrew word that means to scream, to cry with a loud voice, to cry with a disturbed heart. That's intense. Again, we sometimes cry like, Lord, help me. There's other times, man, we are yelling because we're so distressed. And this is what's happening in his life right now. And he is praying, or he prayed about the wickedness in the land. He became more and more burdened, and he wondered if God is that indifferent. Do you really not care? I'm sure he knew the history of what had happened to the northern kingdom. It's like, Lord, we're going to see the same fate if you don't do something here. Again, he had probably been a part of a revival with King Josiah, and now that his son's in charge, this guy's just ruining our country, Lord. When are you going to put a stop to this? One commentator put it like this: this prophet sounds more like a singer than a seer. Apparently, people who lead worship are very passionate. And complainers. Not ours, but I've heard of others. But it's interesting because, and the reason this commentator said that is, he says, because part of Israel's worship, and we see this throughout the Psalms, it involved making these passionate pleas to God for help. When there was times of trouble, and we see that again through the Psalms. Read through the Psalms. How many times, oh, my soul is cast down, Lord, or why don't you go do this and break my enemy's teeth, and just things like that, that they're very passionate, as worship leaders should be. The same commentator said this. He says, Israel did not normally complain about its troubles in the letter to the editors. They took their pleas directly to God in worship. I like that. Here, Habakkuk, being a prophet, but also being somewhat of a musician that understood the Psalms, well-versed in the Psalms, understood that this is what we do. We cry to the Lord when we're hurting, when we're going through so much, when we see everything falling down around us, we go to the source and we worship, even in our complaining. It doesn't sound like worship, but he is. He's being totally honest, and I love that. I remember years ago reading through Jeremiah, and I think it's in chapter 12 where the enemies are going to come in, and Jeremiah, and again, he's somewhere around this time frame as well, because he sees all this coming. And he's going, Lord, I don't understand what you're doing, but let me tell you how you should be doing it. And I'm thinking, I remember reading going, he could just strike you dead right now. You know that. And same thing with Habakkuk right here. Who in the heck do you think you are? Almost shaking your fist. Now, again, he's not shaking his fist. He's worshiping and he's being totally honest, but just the verbiage that he's using. How long are you going to allow this to happen? And why are you showing me this? And when you look at the words here in verses 2 to 4, that the prophet saw and is experiencing, you kind of understand why he cries out the way he does. Look at some of the words that again, I didn't underline, but I just kind of wrote over here. Iniquity, trouble, plundering, and violence. Strife, contention. The law is powerless. Justice never goes forth. Perverse judgments proceed. All of this he's seen with his own eyes, and he's been experiencing that. And he says, why do you show me this, Lord? Well, why do you show me the iniquity? I think that most of us would say that is a good question. Why does God allow us to see iniquity? Why does he allow us to see perversion and trouble? Not only in ourselves, but in others around us and throughout the world. Why does he allow us to see iniquity in ourselves? Could it be, maybe, to keep us humble? That as much as we want to get things right, we sin and we mess up. Is that possible? Why does he allow this? Could it be to make us more submissive to him in the hour of trouble? And perhaps to make us value salvation all the more. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your mercies, Lord. To show us, again, when we're sinning, when there's iniquity in our hearts, that you're getting convicted. Maybe to understand, man, the Holy Spirit, he's still doing something in my life. He's just not letting me go. And why does he allow us to see iniquity in others? Could it be to show us that there by the grace of God go I? Or to make us see the wickedness of sin? Is it possible that he shows us these things in others, the iniquity of others, that when we are tempted to do what they are doing, we might just pass by and go, I don't want to go there, man. I've seen the consequences of what that looks like because of that person or because of those people, and perhaps maybe hate sin just a little bit more and not indulge ourselves. And maybe that's why he lets us see the ugliness. Is there any probability that he shows us those things so that we could admire the grace of God all the more? When we see a sinner like that has been in the world, that has been just so jacked up in his life, and there's a life change. Could it be that he lets us see the ugliness, that when someone gets saved, it's like, man, and that gets us excited that God is still working in this world with or without you? Getting us excited to go, you know what, I want to share the gospel more so. To further the kingdom of heaven. To just plant the seed if that's all you need me to do, Lord. Or to go water it. I might not see the fruit, Lord God, but man, you're doing something because I heard that you've saved these people. So in verse 5 to verse 11, there's a shift here, just so you know. Verse 5. Look among the nations and watch. Be utterly astounded. For I will work a work in your days, which you will not believe, though it were told you. For indeed, I am raising up the Chaldeans, a bitter and hasty nation, which marches through the breadth of the earth. It possesses dwelling places that are not theirs. They are terrible and dreadful. Their judgment and their dignity proceeds from themselves. Their horses also are swifter than leopards, and more fierce than the evening wolves. Their chargers charge ahead. Their cavalry comes from afar. They fly as the eagle that hastens to eat. They all come for violence. Their faces are set like the east wind. They gather captives like sand. They scoff at kings, and princes are scoffed by them. They deride every stronghold, for they heap up earthen mounds and seize them. Then his mind changes, and he transgresses. He commits offenses, ascribing his power to his God. There's a shift in tone here. I don't know if you caught that. And I kind of want to tell you, because here we heard from him, and now we hear the Lord kind of answer him. And I love the fact that even though the prophet didn't think that the Lord was listening, how long, Lord? It doesn't seem like you're doing anything. I love that the Lord answered him. And I don't know if that's ever happened to you when you're concerned, when you're grumbling, when you're complaining, when you're murmuring. And all of a sudden the Lord just speaks to you. It's like, I'm sorry, Lord. I'm so sorry. That's kind of what it kind of sounds like. He's saying, how long? And then the Lord says, look among the nations. And so I love the fact that, again, he doesn't think that God's really acting the way he should, and yet God answers him. He not only answers him, but he assures him that he is at work. And he is at work among the nations. Even though Habakkuk could really not, he couldn't really see it because he was concerned with his own nation. But he's saying, hey, Habakkuk, go beyond that. I'm working in the nations besides your nation. God gave Habakkuk a revelation, not so much an explanation. Because what we need in times of doubt is to have a new look or a new view of God, not so much an explanation. And so he gives them an explanation, because the Lord doesn't owe anybody, you, me, anybody, an explanation. But what he graciously does is reveals himself to him. And not only reveals himself, but reveals the work. I know that Habakkuk was sincere in his crying out because of the way the Lord responds to him. He was truly sincere. Habakkuk had complained about being made to look at the injustice that was going on. But it's almost as if God instructs him and them, the people, as a nation, to get their eyes off of the havoc that was happening around them, and it's almost like look into the international horizon and what is happening out there, Habakkuk. It's not just right around you. Everything's falling apart. The prophet and the people were suffering from nearsightedness. And I think we often do as well. We just see what's right in front of us. And we forget that there's other things going on in life apart from what we're going through. I'm not saying that it's not important what you're going through, and there's times that that's all we can see. But there's times that God has us step back and look at the bigger picture. And that's what he's telling them to do. Hey, step back a little bit, bro. I need you to see what's going on in the horizons out there. You need to see what I'm doing around the world, including your nation and the other nations. And he says to him, look out there and watch and be utterly astounded. Because I'm going to show you something. I'm doing something right now that if I was to really explain to you what it was, you wouldn't be able to handle it. To look, and I think when he took this step back and he kind of like got his thoughts together, it stunned him. Because God's going to reveal something to him that he is going to be utterly astounded, bewildered, and dumbfounded. And in fact, he is dumbfounded. What God is about to perform would be hard for the prophet and even for the nation to believe that God would even do this. Even though God would reveal it to them. You want to know what's going on? Take a step back and I'll show you the bigger picture. Look from about 30,000 feet in the air and look at what's going on. And I often look at this verse where he says, be utterly astounded, for I will work a work in your days, which you would not believe, though it would told to you. Now understand, he's going to share something as we read that text of something bad that is about to happen. But lately it seems like I've been using that verse with people that even if he told us the good things that were happening in the future for us, we wouldn't understand. And I think there's times that God just reveals to us certain things, but he doesn't have to explain it to us. He never told us that we had to understand what the future holds, just that he holds the future. That we have to trust him for the future. Because you and I are not promised tomorrow. So he says, just take care of what's going on right here. But if I were to show you even the good things in your life, you wouldn't quite know what to do with it. And that's why sometimes he just doesn't reveal it to us. But what he is about to reveal to him is something that is not good. Because he tells him in verse 6, for indeed I am raising up the Chaldeans. And you're going, what? I'm raising up the Chaldeans? And it's interesting because he begins to tell him about these people that he has already heard about in his life, that these people are going everywhere and destroying, and they are a brutal and cruel people. You thought the Assyrians were bad? They had those guys for lunch. And he begins to show them these pictures, and a number of pictures here, to describe the Babylonians and how they treated people. He said they are bitter and a haughty nation. They march through the breadth of the earth and they take what's not theirs, man. They are terrible and dreadful. And their judgment and their dignity proceeds from themselves. They are their own law. That's who these people are. I'm bringing those people. And he's kind of like sitting back going, hey, and by the way, their horses, dude, they're like leopards, man. Those things are so swift. They're so amazing. Man, not to talk about the evening wolves. They are so different than the morning wolves. Because the evening wolves, man, those things are brutal. They will charge in and take care of stuff. Like the eagle or the vulture that comes in and just swoops in and takes its prey. And you can't do anything about it. Their army men, they sweep across the desert like the east wind. And they gather and they deport their prisoners, just like somebody just picking up some sand and taking it and scattering it somewhere else. That's how crazy these guys are. Who can stop these guys? No, God can, but God's the one that's kind of calling them, enlisting them for his aid. It's like, man, you're in trouble, Judah. The Babylonians had no regret or no respect for authority. For kings, for generals, they would often, they had this practice of taking kings and putting them in cages and exhibiting them like animals. They were just brutal. They didn't care. Oh, here's that king. Oh yeah, jump for me. Do something for me. Come here, get some food. They just humiliated these people. And the gates and the walls that the people had, they laughed at that because they were known for making these ramps. I don't care how big they were going to build them, but they were going to build a ramp and they were going to get in. And you couldn't stop them. They were going to build a ramp. If it took a mile that way, they were going to build the ramp to get way up there. Nothing was going to stop them. And then they'd take everybody into exile. I don't think that this was what Habakkuk was expecting. Lord, how long? Why are our people so wicked? Do something about our people. Send a revival. Judge our leaders and establish righteousness in the land. He says, okay, I will, but this is how I'm going to do it. That's. I want you to spare us, not destroy us. He's like, no, I have to destroy you. You see, prophet after prophet had declared God's warning, God's word to them, and they rejected it. Again, what happened to the northern kingdom was 130 some years earlier. And he had warned them, don't do what they've done. And what did they do? They did what they had done. He sent natural calamities like plagues and droughts to them. He had brought military defeat in this place or that place to remind them, hey, you got to trust me. And instead of repenting, they hardened their hearts. And they still went after the gods of the other nations. And so they tried God. They tested his long suffering. And now it was time's up. And it was time to act. And at the end here, in verse 11 in the Amplified, it says, then they sweep like the wind and pass on. And they load themselves with guilt, as do all men whose power is their own God. The NLT says like this, they sweep, pass like the wind, and are gone. And they are deeply guilty, for their own strength is their God. In other words, they come and they will swoop you in and they will take you out. But part of that verse is saying, but they went over what I allowed them to do, what I wanted them to do. And they're guilty. And he will deal with them. And so verse 12 to the end of the chapter. Again, another shift. Now Habakkuk is speaking again. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord, my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. The Lord, O Lord, you have appointed them for judgment. O Rock, you have marked them for correction. You are of purer eyes than to behold evil, and cannot look on wickedness. Why do you look at those who deal treacherously and hold their tongue when the wicked, and hold your tongue when the wicked devour a person more righteous than he? Why do you make men like fish of the sea, like the creeping things that have no ruler over them? They take up all of them with a hook. They catch them with their nets. They gather them in Their dragnets, therefore they rejoice and are glad. Therefore they sacrifice to their net and burn incense to their dragnet, because by them their share is sumptuous, and their food plentiful. Shall they therefore empty their nets and continue to slay nations without pity? Habakkuk was troubled at first because there was no justice against his own people. Lord, they're running rampant. They're out of control, Lord. And God answers and says, well, I'll reveal to you how the judgment will go. Now Habakkuk is kind of troubled in the way that judgment is going to come. You were crying, Lord, how long, and why do I have to see this? He says, oh, well, let me show you what I'm going to do. And he comes back and he's like, you're kidding me. Those people are way more wicked than our people. I know we're bad, but not as bad as them. And I can't believe that you're going to get someone who is worse than we are. But we're not that bad anymore. And have those guys. Now, it would be like, forgive me for my sarcasm, but I'm telling you, it would be like us crying about the state of the church in America, or even America itself. Man, oh man, I can't believe that for the last 30, 40 years we've been killing all these babies and blah, blah, blah. And Lord, you need to bring judgment. And all these people doing this and this and that. And Lord, I can't believe it. And God says, okay, I'll fix the problem. I'm going to destroy the United States. I'll bring in a communist regime, a socialist regime. And you're going, no, not that. It's like, but you told me, how dare that we do all these things, and it seems like we go unpunished. And we say, wait a minute, Lord. The problem's bad, but it seems like the cure is kind of worse. And aren't you purer than that? To allow some crazy regime to come and overtake us? Or to have our regime just implode? And it's like they don't know what they're doing. It's like, well, again, judgment is coming, people. Do we want the Lord to act or not? Well, that's not exactly what I meant. But you see, this shook Habakkuk to the core, as it should to us as well. When we're praying for certain things, God hears your prayer. Oh, no, I'm not that powerful. It's like, really, aren't you his son or his daughter? He hears your prayer. Lord, these people over here, take care of them. And then something happens, you're going, gosh, I didn't think it would be that bad. And so it seems like he's more upset now, after God reveals to him what he is about to do, than he was before when he was crying. And it's almost because he understood God's character that troubles him. Lord, you can't look on wickedness like this. And I know that oftentimes we're going, God just can't look on wickedness. And I it's like, you're kidding me, right? Because Satan still has access to the throne. I don't know if you know that. According to Job. He still has access to the throne. God is not like, I can't see it. Don't tell me about it. Nobody say anything. He doesn't do that. He knows what's going on. He knows every perverse thing that happens. He knows every murder. He knows everything. He sees it all. And we say, well, why aren't you acting? Because if you really want him to act, then maybe he's going to nitpick your life and go, well, I see what nobody else sees, bro. And I will deal with you because judgment begins in the house of God. And we're going, oh, no, not in the house of God, Lord, because we're good. I think it's easy for us to say, oh Lord, how long? And to ask the question, why? But you better be ready when he reveals how he might work. And don't be scared. Again, he's still in charge. Oh, Israel's done. Judah is done. And he revealed to him, I'm going to bring these people in, and they will utterly destroy everything. You don't think God cares about that? They're his people. Let me read verse 1 of the next chapter, but we won't get into it. This is what he says. I will stand my watch and set myself on the rampart and watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I am corrected. Again, you can cry all day long. Why, Lord? I can't believe it. But be careful, sonny boy, because you will be corrected. When you see the bigger picture, when you take a step back, and again, God owes you no explanation. But if he reveals it to you, you're going to go, I'm so sorry, Lord. Let me pray for those people. Lord, I'm so sorry, Lord. My heart should be breaking instead of wanting vengeance. The wrath of God is no joke, peeps. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you and we praise you, Lord, for your wonderful, wonderful word, Lord. Lord, thank you for who you are. And Lord, as we cry out sometimes, and I think oftentimes because we're selfish, and we can't believe that you allow certain things. Lord, forgive us, Lord, when we don't understand that you are totally long-suffering, not only on our behalf, but on other people's behalf, Lord. Help us to take a step back, Lord. Help us to find ourselves in that personal, intimate time with you, Lord. That when we're crying, when we're complaining, Lord, again, Lord, that you would just reveal just more of who you are. And even if it scares us, Lord, that we would wait to see how you will correct us. I thank you, Lord. Go before us, Father. We ask, God, that you would have mercy on us. Have mercy on us as a people. Lord, help us to be doing what you've called us to do. You've revealed things to us. You let us see things, Lord, that other people can't see. Help us, Lord, to use it for your glory. We thank you in Jesus' name.